Phones go silent, trails stay the same, and help doesn't come the way people expect. Every year, in the Great Smoky Mountains, visitors step into areas where signals vanish, time stretches, and familiar tools stop working. Rangers don't call it dangerous. They call it normal. But that normal has led to overnight waits, delayed returns, and searches that begin only after someone doesn't come back. This is the Smoky Mountain Dead Zone, not a single place on the map, but a condition shaped by terrain, trees, and distance. And why rangers quietly warn visitors long before anything goes wrong, where the signal ends. Great Smoky Mountains National Park lies along the border of Tennessee and North Carolina, covering a landscape defined by long ridges, narrow valleys, and dense forest that limits visibility in every direction. Elevation shifts quickly. Roads climb from river corridors into higher gaps, then descend again into shaded hollows where light behaves differently and time feels uneven. Visitors enter through gateways such as Gatlinburg, Townsend, Cherokee, and Cosby, then disperse along main routes like Newfound Gap Road and Little River Road before branching onto smaller spurs that end abruptly at trailheads or pull-offs. Beyond those points, movement slows and becomes dependent on terrain rather than distance. Park safety information describes this environment in direct language. Cellular service is limited across most of the park and often disappears entirely once visitors leave paved roads. Rangers routinely explain that phones should not be relied upon for navigation or emergency contact. Printed maps remain standard issue at visitor centers, and visitors are encouraged to carry them even on short outings. It is presented as a description of the park's operating conditions. Connectivity in the Smokies is uneven and unpredictable. A device may show a usable signal at a scenic overlook and lose it moments later along a descending trail. Narrow drainages, heavy canopy cover, and the orientation of surrounding ridges interrupt reception without notice. These gaps are not confined to remote areas. They appear along popular trails, near picnic areas, and sometimes within sight of traffic. Rangers commonly refer to these areas as dead zones, though they are not marked or fixed. They shift with location, weather, and infrastructure beyond the park boundary. Emergency response is structured around this reality. Rangers communicate primarily through radio systems linked to dispatch centers that coordinate with local law enforcement, fire departments, and medical services. When incidents occur beyond road access, response times increase. Ground teams may need to hike for hours to reach a subject, carrying medical equipment and extraction gear. Helicopters are used when conditions allow, but weather, terrain, and visibility limit their availability. These constraints are routine and expected, not exceptional. A rescue operation in November 2012 illustrates how these factors converge. A hiker became stranded on a remote section of the Appalachian Trail after snowfall covered higher elevations earlier in the week. Rangers determined that ground access would be slow and potentially hazardous due to ice and terrain. A helicopter was requested to locate and extract the individual. The operation required coordination across agencies and depended on a brief window of suitable flying conditions. The hiker was removed safely, but the response involved resources far beyond what visitors typically associate with a short trip into the woods. Water-related incidents follow similar patterns. The Smokies receive frequent rainfall, and storms can affect one drainage while leaving another untouched. Rivers and creeks respond quickly to upstream precipitation, rising without visible warning at downstream locations. Rangers consistently advise against tubing and wading during periods of unsettled weather. These advisories are based on repeated incidents rather than isolated cases. In July 2011, a drowning occurred at the Townsend Y, a heavily visited recreation area where the middle and west prongs of the Little River meet. A man tubing with family members fell from his inner tube into a deep pool and did not resurface. Witnesses called for help, and multiple agencies responded, including a dive team. Despite the area's proximity to roads and emergency services, the recovery took more than an hour. The incident highlighted how quickly conditions can change and how response time is influenced by water, terrain, and coordination rather than distance alone. Fire has also shaped how rangers assess risk and communicate limitations. In November 2016, the Chimney Tops 2 fire burned thousands of acres within the park and contributed to widespread destruction in surrounding communities. Post-fire reviews examined many aspects of the response, including communication challenges in steep, wooded terrain under extreme conditions. While fire behavior was central to those analyses, the broader lesson reinforced what rangers already understood. Information and access move slowly in this landscape, especially when infrastructure is strained. As a result of accumulated incidents, certain areas of the park have been closed permanently or intermittently. The superintendent's compendium documents these restrictions in administrative language. One such area is the informal manway route on the backside of the Chimney Top's pinnacles. This steep, unofficial path was used by experienced climbers for decades. Over time, it became associated with numerous search and rescue operations, many involving serious injuries and at least one fatality. After fire damage further destabilized the terrain, the route was closed. The justification was not speculative. It was based on documented rescues and observed conditions. Search operations provide another view into the park's constraints. When a visitor is reported missing, rangers begin with confirmed details such as vehicle location, intended route, and last known contact. Searches expand along trails, creeks, and likely travel corridors. Dense vegetation limits visibility, even at short distances. Intersecting trails and game paths complicate tracking. In April 2023, a search in the Deep Creek area involved teams from dozens of agencies across multiple states. The operation extended over several days, covering rugged terrain with limited access points. The scale of the response reflected the difficulty of the environment rather than the remoteness of the location. A later incident, reported in February 2025, involved a 73-year-old hiker who was found deceased a short distance off Enlow Creek Trail. Her vehicle had been located at Smokemont Campground days earlier, and search efforts focused on nearby trails and waterways. She was discovered less than a mile from a maintained trail. The proximity did not reduce the complexity of the search. Thick undergrowth, uneven ground, and limited communication slowed progress despite concentrated effort and favorable weather. Official park communications about these incidents remain concise. News releases list dates, times, locations, and assisting agencies. Personal details are minimal and language is restrained. Statements from park officials, when included, are brief and factual. This approach reflects policy and necessity. The purpose is documentation, not interpretation. Across decades of incident reports, a consistent pattern emerges. The Smokies are one of the most visited national parks in the United States, yet large portions remain difficult to reach quickly. Communication gaps are normal rather than unusual. Visitors often underestimate how rapidly familiar tools stop functioning once they leave developed areas. Rangers plan for that loss of connectivity as a routine condition. The term dead zone persists because it is practical shorthand, not because it marks a single place. It refers to an environment shaped by mountains, forest cover, and distance from infrastructure. In the Smokies, the absence of a signal is not an anomaly. It is part of the setting, present on clear days and during storms, near popular overlooks and deep in backcountry drainages alike. The map in the glove box. Location inside Great Smoky Mountains National Park is rarely described in simple terms. Rangers do not ask how far someone believes they have walked. They ask where the person entered the trail, which junction they passed, and whether they crossed water. Distance is secondary to position. A mile uphill from one trailhead is not equivalent to a mile downhill from another, and a short distance off trail can place someone into an entirely different drainage with no direct route back. Visitors often arrive with digital maps already loaded. Screens show trails as thin lines and elevation as subtle shading. These representations flatten the landscape. Slopes appear gentle, curves appear minor, and intersections seem orderly. On the ground, trails twist, narrow, and disappear into vegetation. Rocks and roots change pace. What looks like a simple loop becomes a sequence of decisions made under fatigue, heat, or fading light. Paper maps remain a standard reference for rangers. The versions distributed at visitor centers emphasize contour lines, trail names, and watershed boundaries. These details matter during incidents. A ranger coordinating a response needs to know whether a person is above or below a ridge, whether they are moving toward a creek or away from it, and which side of a drainage they are likely on. Those factors determine access routes and search priorities. Vehicle location is often the first confirmed point in a timeline. Parking areas throughout the park are logged and routinely checked. When a vehicle remains overnight without a corresponding backcountry permit, rangers take note. In some cases, a vehicle is discovered long after a hike was planned. That information narrows the search area, but does not simplify it. Many trailheads connect to multiple routes that branch repeatedly within the first few miles, each leading into different terrain. Time estimates are another source of confusion. Trails in the Smokies rarely include posted hiking times. Rangers avoid assigning fixed durations because pace varies widely depending on weather, load, trail condition, and experience. A descent that feels quick early in the day can become slow and unsteady on the return. Search planners account for this by estimating travel ranges rather than fixed endpoints. Fatigue changes movement patterns, and people often stop earlier than intended. Elevation adds another layer of complexity. The park spans more than 5,000 feet of vertical range. Weather conditions can shift dramatically across that span. Fog, wind, and colder temperatures are common at higher elevations, even when valleys remain warm and clear. Rangers track elevation bands when reviewing itineraries and missing person reports. A hiker dressed for mild conditions at lower elevations may encounter cold exposure after climbing into cloud cover. Drainages provide a predictable influence on movement. Water flows downhill, and trails often follow creeks before climbing away from them. When someone leaves a trail, intentionally or by mistake, gravity tends to guide movement toward water. Rangers factor this tendency into search planning. Creeks, streams, and river corridors become priority areas. Especially after rain, a person following water downstream may travel farther than expected while remaining concealed by vegetation and terrain. Trail junctions function as anchors in this system. Each junction has a name, and many are marked with signs pointing toward destinations rather than distances. Rangers memorize these intersections and their relationships to one another. During radio communication, junction names replace longer descriptions. A shared understanding of these reference points allows teams approaching from different directions to coordinate without visual contact. Visitors unfamiliar with this approach sometimes struggle to describe where they are. Common descriptions rely on visual impressions rather than fixed features. Phrases like "near a waterfall" or "by a clearing" offer little precision in a park with thousands of similar features. Rangers are trained to ask specific follow-up questions. They may ask whether the trail is ascending or descending, which side of the creek the person is on, or what color blazes are visible on nearby trees. These details translate vague descriptions into usable information. Maps left in glove boxes often become relevant only after a problem develops. Rangers note that many visitors carry paper maps, but do not consult them until they feel uncertain. At that point, stress and fatigue can make interpretation difficult. Contour lines and trail labels require attention that may be hard to sustain late in the day. This delay contributes to misjudgment rather than preventing it. Weather interacts with navigation in subtle ways. Fog reduces visibility and erases landmarks. Rain alters trail surfaces, making footing unreliable. Snow can obscure blazes and signage entirely. Rangers consider recent weather when reconstructing movement. A trail that is straightforward in dry conditions may become confusing after heavy rain washes away tread or deposits debris across intersections. Search planning documents reflect this layered understanding of space. Teams are assigned sectors defined by terrain rather than radius. A half-mile section of steep drainage may require more time and personnel than several miles of level trail. Helicopter support, when available, focuses on open areas and ridgelines where visibility is possible. Dense canopy limits aerial effectiveness, pushing more effort onto ground teams. These practices are not unique to rare emergencies. They are part of routine operations. Rangers use the same location framework during minor incidents, medical assists, and lost hiker calls. The system emphasizes reliability over convenience. It assumes that devices will fail, batteries will drain, and conditions will change. The difference between visitor perception and ranger practice is most apparent when someone believes they are close to help. A trail may parallel a road for miles while remaining separated by steep slopes and dense forest. Sound carries unevenly, Traffic noise can be audible while access remains difficult. Rangers account for this disconnect when responding to reports from callers who believe they are right next to a road. Over time, the map becomes more than a navigation tool. It becomes a record of how the park is understood operationally. Lines and labels represent patterns observed through years of response. They reflect where people tend to go, where they tend to turn back, and where they most often get stuck. Inside the Smokies, location is not a point, but a relationship between terrain, time, and movement. Rangers work within that framework every day. The map in the glove box, when unfolded early and read carefully, aligns visitor expectations with that reality. When it stays folded until something goes wrong, it becomes another detail in an already complicated situation. When short trails become long days, at the trailhead, the day often feels contained. The parking area is quiet, the forest close and still, and the first stretch of path appears level and forgiving. There is no clock posted, no estimate attached to the destination, only a name on a sign and an arrow pointing forward. The absence of urgency feels reassuring. Many visitors step onto the trail, believing they have accounted for what lies ahead simply by knowing where it ends. As movement begins, time starts to separate from expectation. Progress is steady at first, guided by habit rather than calculation. The trail's surface changes gradually, from packed dirt to exposed roots and rock. Slopes emerge in long, shallow segments that do not announce themselves all at once. Pace adjusts without conscious decision. Breathing deepens, stops lengthen. These shifts occur early, often within the first mile, but they are rarely recognized as meaningful at the moment. Elevation plays a central role. Much of the Smokies trail system gains or loses significant vertical distance over relatively short spans. A route that appears modest on a map may climb continuously for hours. Unlike trails designed with frequent switchbacks, many Smoky Mountain paths follow older alignments that rise directly along ridges or drainages. The result is sustained effort rather than brief exertion. Rangers reviewing incident timelines frequently note that visitors planned for distance but not for elevation. Return travel introduces a separate set of challenges. A descent covered quickly in the morning can feel different later in the day. Knees absorb repeated impact. Balance becomes more deliberate on uneven ground. Loose gravel and damp leaves increase the risk of slipping as muscles tire. Visitors often assume that downhill travel will compensate for fatigue. In practice, it can extend travel time rather than reduce it. Environmental conditions compound these effects. The Smokies are characterized by high humidity and frequent temperature variation. Summer heat persists under dense canopy, limiting airflow and slowing evaporation. Clothing becomes saturated, adding weight and discomfort. Dehydration develops gradually, often unnoticed until coordination and decision-making are affected. Rangers report that many medical assists occur close to trailheads, not because the terrain is easier there, but because fatigue peaks during the return. Light behaves differently beneath the forest canopy. Even on clear days, shaded valleys lose brightness well before sunset. In narrow drainages, dusk arrives early as ridges block remaining light. Visitors accustomed to open terrain may not anticipate how quickly visibility declines. Headlamps are sometimes left in vehicles or not carried at all on hikes perceived as brief. Rangers frequently respond to calls involving hikers delayed not by injury but by darkness. Weather adds further variability. Fog can move in quickly at higher elevations, reducing visibility to a few yards. Rain alters trail surfaces, turning packed dirt into slick clay and washing debris across junctions. In winter months, ice forms in shaded sections long after temperatures rise elsewhere. Snow at elevation may not be visible from trailheads below. Rangers account for recent weather when estimating how long a route may take, knowing that conditions can slow progress without stopping it entirely. Decision points along the trail often go unnoticed. Junctions may be passed without review. Side paths lead toward overlooks, campsites, or water sources, drawing visitors slightly off their intended route. These deviations seem minor in isolation. Over time, they add distance and consume daylight. Rangers analyzing routes after incidents often find that planned itineraries change subtly, shaped by moment-to-moment choices rather than deliberate rerouting. Fatigue influences judgment in predictable ways. As energy declines, visitors may shorten breaks to maintain momentum or skip stops altogether. Hydration and nutrition are delayed rather than prioritized. The desire to just keep moving replaces earlier pacing plans. These patterns appear repeatedly in ranger interviews and rescue reports. They do not indicate recklessness, they reflect common human responses to physical strain. The Smokies trail signage contributes to this dynamic. Signs typically list destinations by name rather than distance or time. This practice reflects historical convention rather than oversight. Rangers rely on the same signage to orient themselves, but they interpret it through experience. Visitors encountering a familiar place name may assume proximity based on recognition rather than remaining effort. That assumption can shape decisions about whether to continue or turn back. Incidents arising from extended hikes are often categorized as routine. A hiker calls for assistance after nightfall. A group reports being overdue but unharmed. Rangers respond with lights, radios, and patient coordination. The response focuses on safe escort rather than emergency extraction. Search and rescue reports from the park show that many delays occur within planned routes. People are not lost in unfamiliar terrain. They are delayed along known trails, slowed by fatigue, weather, or darkness. Rangers emphasize that these situations are common and expected. Planning accounts for them as part of normal operations. Equipment choices influence outcomes as well. Footwear suited for short walks may become uncomfortable over hours of uneven terrain. Clothing chosen for valley temperatures may be inadequate at elevation. Small emissions accumulate. Rangers note that many delayed hikers carry phones with sufficient battery but lack light sources, extra layers, or sufficient water. These gaps do not cause immediate problems. They extend the day incrementally. The park's size amplifies these effects. With more than 800 miles of maintained trails, patterns repeat across locations and seasons. A short trail in one area behaves like a longer trail elsewhere due to slope and surface. Rangers draw on this accumulated knowledge when advising visitors and responding to calls. Their guidance emphasizes preparation over prediction. Extended days are not always associated with emergencies. Many visitors complete longer than expected hikes without incident, returning tired but unharmed. The pattern becomes visible primarily when something interrupts that return. Darkness, injury, weather, or simple exhaustion brings the delay to attention. Rangers then reconstruct the day using known factors: entry time, route, elevation, and conditions. Inside the Smokies, time is not measured by mileage alone. It is shaped by terrain, environment, and the limits of endurance. Trails do not announce how long they will take. They reveal it gradually, step by step. For those who plan only for distance, the day often extends quietly beyond its original bounds. After sunset on familiar ground, darkness arrives in the Smokies without ceremony. There is no clear moment when day ends and night begins. Light thins gradually beneath the canopy, then recedes more quickly in valleys where ridges block the remaining sky. Trails that felt open earlier become narrow corridors defined by shadow. Colors flatten, depth becomes harder to judge. What remains visible is limited to what falls directly ahead. Many visitors experience this transition while still moving. Plans built around daylight margins begin to compress. Steps slow as footing becomes less certain. Rocks and roots that were easy to avoid earlier blend into the trail surface. Rangers note that people often continue forward during this period, believing they are close enough to finish before darkness settles completely. That belief is usually based on memory rather than current conditions. Navigation changes first. Familiar landmarks become difficult to recognize. Junction signs reflect light unevenly or disappear into shadow altogether. Trail blazes lose contrast against darkened bark. In some areas, leaf litter obscures tread, making it hard to distinguish the trail from surrounding ground. Even experienced hikers report hesitation at intersections they passed confidently earlier in the day. Temperature shifts accompany the loss of light. Valleys cool quickly as air settles and moisture condenses. Wind becomes more noticeable along ridges. Clothing chosen for daytime conditions may no longer be adequate. Rangers frequently document delayed hikers who underestimated how cold they would feel while moving slowly or stopping to reassess their route. These temperature changes are gradual, but their effects accumulate. Sound behaves differently at night. Streams become louder as ambient noise fades. Wind through treetops masks footfalls and distant voices. Traffic noise from nearby roads may carry intermittently, creating the impression of proximity without providing a clear direction. Rangers caution that sound alone is an unreliable indicator of location in mountainous terrain, especially after dark. Artificial light, when available, reshapes perception rather than restoring daylight. Headlamps illuminate a narrow field, creating sharp contrast between lit ground and surrounding darkness. Depth perception is reduced. Shadows exaggerate surface features, making minor obstacles appear larger. Rangers reviewing incident reports often note that falls increase after nightfall, even on familiar trails, due to misjudged footing within limited light. Some visitors do not carry dedicated light sources, relying instead on phone screens. Rangers report that this practice shortens usable visibility and drains batteries quickly. Phone lights provide limited reach and require constant hand positioning, reducing balance. Battery conservation becomes a concern as power levels drop. Once a device shuts down, both light and communication are lost simultaneously. Decision-making shifts under these conditions. Fatigue and limited visibility encourage conservative choices, but they can also prompt hurried movement. Visitors may attempt to maintain pace to reach a known endpoint, increasing the risk of missteps. Rangers describe these patterns as predictable rather than exceptional. Delayed hikers encountered after sunset are often still on established trails. They are not lost in the sense of being disoriented beyond recovery. They are delayed by reduced pace, environmental conditions, or uncertainty at junctions. Rangers responding to these calls prioritize contact and assessment rather than rapid extraction. The goal is to stabilize the situation and guide the group out safely. Communication at night relies heavily on radio coordination. Visual signaling is limited by terrain and vegetation. Rangers use call and response techniques, listening for voices or whistles while moving along trails. Headlamp flashes may be used in open areas, but dense forest reduces their effectiveness. These methods require patience and familiarity with terrain. Weather compounds nighttime challenges. Fog reduces visibility further, reflecting light back toward the source and obscuring distance. Rain dampens sound and slicks trail surfaces. In colder months, ice forms quickly in shaded areas after sunset. Rangers factor these conditions into response planning, adjusting routes and pacing to minimize risk. Search operations that extend into night hours follow established protocols. Teams are assigned specific trail segments or drainages. Progress is deliberate. Frequent check-ins confirm position and condition. Rangers emphasize that moving slowly at night is safer than attempting to maintain daytime pace. This approach contrasts with visitor instincts, which often prioritize speed. Incident records show that many nighttime responses conclude without injury. Groups are escorted back to trailheads or campgrounds. Medical attention is rarely required. These outcomes reinforce the park's emphasis on preparation rather than restriction. Rangers view delayed returns as part of routine operations in a large, complex landscape. Familiarity does not eliminate risk after dark. Local visitors and repeat hikers are represented in incident logs alongside first-time guests. Knowledge of a trail during daylight does not fully translate to nighttime conditions. Rangers note that assumptions based on previous experience can contribute to misjudgment, particularly when conditions differ from those encountered before. The park does not impose curfews on trails. Visitors are free to hike at any hour. Rangers provide guidance rather than enforcement. That guidance emphasizes carrying light sources, extra layers, and realistic time buffers. These recommendations arise directly from observed patterns rather than abstract safety principles. After sunset, the Smokies operate under different constraints. Terrain remains the same, but perception shifts. Movement slows, margins narrow. What was once a short remaining distance becomes a careful sequence of steps. Rangers working these hours treat the environment as neutral rather than threatening. Their focus remains on methodical navigation and steady communication. Night does not transform the park into a different place. It reveals aspects of it that daylight conceals. Trails become quieter. Landmarks recede. Time stretches again, shaped by caution rather than momentum. For those still moving after dark, The experience is defined less by distance than by attention, waiting where the trail stops. Some nights in the Smokies end without forward movement. A group reaches a point where continuing feels uncertain, and turning back seems no better. The trail narrows, light fades, and the margin for error contracts. In those moments, stopping becomes a decision rather than a failure. Rangers encounter this outcome often enough that it is treated as a normal state within the park's operating environment. Stopping usually happens incrementally. Pace slows first, conversation thins, breaks lengthen. Eventually, movement pauses for longer than intended. A junction is reconsidered. A creek crossing looks different in low light. The ground appears less predictable. These are not dramatic turning points. They are practical assessments made under limited information. Rangers reviewing incident timelines see patterns in where people stop. Flat areas near water, widened sections of trail, old roadbeds, and backcountry campsites appear frequently. These locations offer space to stand or sit without blocking the trail. They also provide reference points that can be described over radio. A named campsite or a marked crossing gives structure to a situation that might otherwise remain vague. Waiting changes the nature of risk. Movement-related hazards decrease, while exposure-related concerns increase. Temperature drops after sunset, especially in valleys where cold air settles. Moisture accumulates on clothing and skin. Wind becomes noticeable along ridgelines. Rangers document that people who stop moving cool faster than they expect, even in mild seasons. The body's heat production falls with inactivity, and the environment takes over. Shelter choices are usually improvised. Some visitors carry emergency bivy sacks or extra layers. Others rely on natural features. Downed trees, rock overhangs, and dense rhododendron thickets appear in incident reports as temporary windbreaks. Rangers do not encourage off-trail movement to find shelter, but they recognize that people often shift a short distance to improve conditions. These adjustments are typically small and cautious. Communication during waiting periods follows a different rhythm. Calls to dispatch may be brief to conserve battery power. Messages focus on confirming location rather than describing conditions. Rangers advise stationary parties to limit movement once contact is established. Remaining in one place simplifies response planning and reduces the chance of misalignment between reported and actual position. Light sources are managed carefully. Headlamps may be used intermittently rather than continuously. Phone screens are dimmed or turned off between checks. Rangers note that many delayed hikers are surprised by how quickly batteries drain in cold conditions. Power conservation becomes part of the waiting strategy, even when communication has already been made. Time perception shifts during these pauses. Minutes feel longer. Small discomforts become more noticeable. Hunger and thirst move to the foreground. Rangers account for these factors when planning response. A stationary subject may be physically uninjured but mentally strained by uncertainty and cold. Clear, simple instructions are used to maintain focus and prevent unnecessary movement. Waiting also affects how rangers search. A stationary subject allows teams to plan direct routes rather than sweeping broad areas. Dispatchers confirm last known coordinates, landmarks, and descriptions. Ground teams are assigned specific approaches based on terrain and access. Helicopter support, if available, focuses on confirming position rather than extraction when canopy cover limits landing options. Noise becomes a tool during these operations. Rangers may ask stationary parties to use whistles, shout periodically, or create rhythmic sounds. These signals travel unevenly in mountainous terrain, but they provide orientation cues. At night, sound can be more reliable than light in dense forest. Rangers listening for these cues move slowly to avoid masking them with their own movement. Weather conditions influence whether waiting remains the safest option. In steady rain, hypothermia risk increases. In clear, calm conditions, waiting may be manageable for several hours. Rangers assess forecasts and current observations before advising next steps. These assessments are conservative, prioritizing stability over speed. Incident records show that many waiting scenarios resolve without escalation. Rangers reach the group, provide additional light or clothing, and escort them out at a controlled pace. Medical intervention is uncommon. The primary task is navigation rather than treatment. These outcomes reinforce the park's guidance that stopping can be appropriate when conditions deteriorate. Waiting is also common during daylight, though it is less visible. Hikers pause to reassess routes, treat blisters, or wait out weather. The difference at night lies in the reduced margin for correction. A misstep in daylight can be corrected quickly. After dark, correction may require assistance. Rangers note that people who choose to wait earlier often avoid more complex situations later. Backcountry permits factor into these decisions. Designated campsites provide predictable locations with known access routes. Rangers can plan responses more efficiently when a party is known to be at a permitted site. Unplanned waiting off trail complicates response, but it is still treated as manageable if the party remains stationary and communicative. Waiting does not imply passivity. Rangers instruct parties to monitor their condition, maintain warmth, and update dispatch at agreed intervals. These check-ins create a shared timeline. They also reduce anxiety by establishing expectations. The process is procedural rather than conversational, focused on information exchange. Historical records within the park show that waiting has long been part of backcountry travel. Before modern communication devices, hikers delayed by weather or injury often stayed in place until daylight. Rangers draw on this history when framing guidance. The emphasis remains on minimizing risk rather than maintaining schedules. Visitors sometimes express concern about staying overnight unexpectedly. Rangers address this by normalizing the experience. An unplanned night outdoors is described as uncomfortable but manageable under many conditions. This framing aligns expectations with reality and discourages risky attempts to push on despite deteriorating conditions. Waiting where the trail stops alters priorities. Distance becomes irrelevant. Time becomes flexible. The focus shifts to maintaining position and condition until assistance arrives or conditions improve. Rangers approach these situations methodically, relying on terrain knowledge and communication rather than urgency. In the Smokies, stopping is not an end state. It is a temporary alignment with the landscape's constraints. Trails do not guarantee passage at all hours. When movement no longer serves safety, waiting becomes part of the route, the call that reaches no one. Communication inside Great Smoky Mountains National Park does not fail all at once. It fades unevenly. A device may connect briefly, drop without warning, then reconnect minutes later from the same spot. Visitors often experience this inconsistency as a technical issue rather than a geographic one. Rangers treat it as a fixed characteristic of the landscape, shaped by elevation, vegetation, and distance from infrastructure outside park boundaries. Most emergency calls that originate within the park are placed from front country areas. Parking lots, visitor centers, and road corridors provide the most reliable access to cellular networks. Once visitors move beyond those zones, connection becomes unpredictable. Dispatch records show that many attempted calls never complete. Others connect only long enough to transmit fragments of information before dropping. These partial contacts influence how rangers interpret and prioritize response. When a call does connect, clarity becomes critical. Dispatchers are trained to extract location details quickly. Knowing that the line may fail at any moment, callers are asked to identify trail names, junctions, mile markers, or nearby landmarks. Vague descriptions delay response. Rangers reviewing recordings note that first-time callers often focus on describing their situation rather than their location. That emphasis shifts as experience accumulates. Text messages behave differently than voice calls. In some areas, short messages may transmit even when voice connections fail. Rangers sometimes advise callers to attempt texts if calls do not go through. These messages, when received, often arrive without context. A single sentence or set of coordinates may be all that comes through. Dispatchers log the information and attempt follow-up, aware that replies may not reach the sender. Radio communication forms the backbone of ranger operations. Handheld radios link field staff to dispatch centers and to one another. Coverage is broader and more reliable than cellular service, but still affected by terrain. Repeaters placed on high ridges extend range, yet valleys and drainages remain challenging. Rangers are trained to move deliberately to improve signal, stepping into open areas or climbing short distances to regain contact. Visitors sometimes carry satellite-based devices, including personal locator beacons and satellite messengers. These tools provide an alternative to cellular networks, but they are not immune to limitations. Dense canopy, steep walls, and narrow valleys can obstruct satellite visibility. Rangers note that activation does not guarantee immediate contact. Signals may queue before transmission, and message content may be limited. False assumptions about communication shape behavior. Some visitors delay calling for assistance, believing coverage will improve farther along the trail. Others conserve battery power by turning devices off, intending to reconnect later. Rangers encounter both patterns in incident reports. Delays rarely stem from panic. They arise from reasonable expectations formed outside the park's conditions. When communication fails entirely, rangers rely on indirect indicators. Overdue reports from family members, unattended vehicles, and unreturned permits initiate response. These triggers introduce delays measured in hours or days rather than minutes. Search timelines reflect the point at which absence becomes noticeable rather than the moment a problem began. Dispatch protocols account for uncertainty. A single dropped call may generate multiple possible locations. Rangers map likely routes based on entry points and intended destinations. Search areas expand gradually, prioritizing high-probability corridors. Communication gaps lengthen this process by reducing confirmation points. During ongoing incidents, rangers may attempt repeated contact attempts at scheduled intervals. Calls, texts, and satellite messages are sent even without confirmation that they will be received. These attempts create a record of effort and establish potential contact windows. Rangers note that some devices reconnect hours later, delivering delayed messages out of sequence. Battery life becomes a limiting factor. Cold temperatures reduce capacity. Screen brightness and active applications drain power quickly. Rangers advise callers to minimize use once contact is established. Dispatchers may instruct callers to power down devices between check-ins. These instructions aim to extend availability rather than maintain continuous contact. Sound-based communication supplements electronic methods. Whistles, shouts, and other audible signals are used when teams are within proximity. Dispatchers may instruct callers to listen for radio chatter or helicopter noise, though sound travels unpredictably in mountainous terrain. These techniques are situational and rely on timing rather than precision. Misinterpretation of partial communication can complicate response. A brief call may convey urgency without detail. A dropped connection may be perceived as device failure rather than movement. Rangers reviewing cases emphasize the importance of context. A single data point rarely tells the full story. The park's communication challenges are documented in training materials and operational reviews. They are presented as environmental constraints rather than system deficiencies. Infrastructure improvements are limited by terrain, policy, and the park's protected status. As a result, rangers plan operations assuming intermittent or absent contact. Visitors sometimes assume that emergency numbers function differently within the park. Rangers clarify that dialing emergency services does not bypass coverage limitations. Calls require a connection to external networks. Without that connection, attempts do not reach dispatch. This reality shapes guidance provided at visitor centers and trailheads. Educational materials emphasize redundancy. Carrying multiple navigation tools, sharing itineraries, and setting return times create alternatives to direct communication. Rangers view these measures as part of routine preparation rather than advanced planning. Incident records show that groups with shared plans are located more quickly than solo hikers without contacts. Communication gaps influence how incidents resolve. Some situations escalate due to delayed contact. Others stabilize as parties wait or self-correct before assistance arrives. Rangers note that absence of communication does not always correlate with severity. Many delayed hikers remain safe and stationary while contact is attempted. After contact is restored, information exchange becomes structured. Dispatchers confirm location, condition, and resources available. Instructions are concise. Rangers avoid complex guidance that may be misunderstood or lost if contact drops again. This approach reflects experience rather than urgency. Records of past incidents inform current practice. Rangers analyze communication timelines alongside terrain and weather data. Patterns repeat across seasons. Valleys remain quiet. Ridges offer brief windows. Storms disrupt transmission. These observations shape expectations rather than reactions. The phrase, "no service," appears frequently in visitor accounts. For rangers, it describes a baseline condition. Communication is treated as intermittent by default. Operations proceed accordingly, with patience and methodical planning replacing immediacy. Inside the Smokies, a call that does not connect is not an anomaly. It is part of the environment's structure. Rangers work within that structure daily, adjusting methods rather than outcomes. Communication, when it arrives, is used efficiently. When it does not, response continues along established paths. Found without a signal, search operations in Great Smoky Mountains National Park often begin without confirmation. There is no voice on the line, no coordinates transmitted, no device responding. What exists instead is absence. A vehicle remains at a trailhead past its expected return. A backcountry permit goes unused beyond its end date. A family member reports that a planned check-in never occurred. Rangers treat these indicators as starting points rather than conclusions. The first task is reconstruction. Rangers assemble a timeline using verifiable details. Entry point, date, intended route, experience level, weather conditions, and season are reviewed. This process relies on records rather than assumption. Trail registers, permit databases, and vehicle location logs provide fixed references. Even limited information narrows possibilities by excluding large areas of the park. Movement patterns guide early decisions. Rangers consider how people typically behave in similar circumstances. Most remain on established trails longer than expected. When they leave a trail, it is often gradual rather than abrupt. Side paths, game trails, and drainage corridors appear repeatedly in search histories. These patterns are not predictive in an absolute sense, but they inform priority areas. Terrain analysis follows. Ridges, valleys, and water flow shape likely movement. Gravity favors downhill travel. Trails that parallel streams draw attention when fatigue sets in. Rangers map potential routes using contour lines rather than straight distances. A short drop in elevation can place someone into a different watershed with no direct return route. These transitions are invisible to those unfamiliar with the land, but central to search planning. Vegetation density affects visibility and travel speed. In summer months, undergrowth limits line of sight to a few yards. Rhododendron thickets form near impenetrable barriers. Progress through these areas is slow and exhausting. Rangers account for reduced movement when estimating how far someone may have traveled. A half-mile off-trail can represent hours of effort. Search teams are assigned sectors defined by terrain features. Drainages, ridge spines, and trail segments form boundaries. This method prioritizes thorough coverage over speed. Teams move deliberately, scanning ground and listening rather than advancing continuously. Communication between teams confirms coverage and prevents duplication. Aerial support, when available, is used selectively. Helicopters provide vantage points along ridgelines and open slopes. Dense canopy limits effectiveness in valleys. Rangers do not rely on aerial search alone. It supplements ground efforts rather than replacing them. Spotting from the air often confirms movement patterns inferred from terrain analysis. Historical incident data informs expectations. Rangers review previous searches in the same area. They note where people were found, how long searches took, and what conditions prevailed. This record does not dictate outcomes, but it shapes probability. Sound becomes a factor during searches without communication. Teams pause periodically to listen. Voices, movement, and artificial sounds can carry farther than expected in certain conditions. At other times, wind and water obscure everything. Rangers use controlled noise, such as calling names or using whistles, but only when it will not interfere with listening. Time influences both subject and searcher behavior. As days pass, assumptions change. Initial emphasis on mobility gives way to the possibility of stationary subjects. Campsites, shelters, and flat areas receive renewed focus. Rangers shift resources accordingly, adjusting team size and search patterns. Weather complicates interpretation. Rain alters tracks. Wind moves debris. Snow conceals evidence while preserving it beneath the surface. Rangers document weather alongside search actions, knowing it affects both movement and detection. A trail that would normally show signs of passage may appear undisturbed after a storm. Clothing and equipment choices influence outcomes. Bright colors increase visibility. Neutral tones blend into forest backgrounds. Rangers note these factors when scanning terrain. Gear left behind, such as water bottles or clothing layers, becomes significant. These items establish points along a route and suggest decision-making moments. Recovery locations often surprise those unfamiliar with search patterns. Individuals are frequently found closer to trails than expected, sometimes within sight of them. Vegetation and elevation changes create visual barriers that mask proximity. Rangers emphasize that closeness does not equate to ease of discovery. Searches conclude in varied ways. Some end with assisted walkouts, others involve medical evacuation. Some result in recovery rather than rescue. Rangers document outcomes consistently, focusing on location, condition, and contributing factors. Language remains factual and restrained, reflecting operational standards rather than narrative framing. The absence of communication does not imply chaos. Search operations follow established procedures refined over decades. Each step builds on known constraints rather than speculation. Terrain, weather, and human behavior form the basis of action. Being found without a signal is not uncommon in the Smokies. It reflects the park's structure rather than an anomaly. Rangers expect communication gaps and plan accordingly. Their work continues methodically, guided by land and record rather than contact, when the trail is still there. In many park reports, the trail never disappears. It remains intact, marked, and walkable from start to finish. The surface is visible. Blazes are present. Junctions are signed. Yet people are delayed, assisted, or recovered without ever leaving that path. Rangers encounter these cases frequently enough that they form a distinct category in incident records. These situations often begin with routine plans. A visitor selects a known trail, sometimes one recommended at a visitor center or listed as popular in guidebooks. The route may lead to a waterfall, an overlook, or a loop that reconnects with a road. Expectations are shaped by familiarity. The presence of a maintained trail creates an assumption of manageability that persists even as conditions change. Movement along an intact trail can still slow dramatically. Surface conditions vary with use and weather. Exposed routes form uneven steps. Embedded rocks tilt underfoot. Erosion narrows tread in places, forcing single-file passage. Rangers note that these features require constant attention, reducing pace without any obvious marker that conditions have worsened. Fatigue accumulates quietly. Muscles tire unevenly, affecting balance before strength. Breathing becomes deliberate rather than automatic. Short pauses extend into longer rests. Visitors often continue despite these signals, adjusting pace rather than reassessing plans. Rangers reviewing timelines see this pattern repeated across age groups and experience levels. Environmental exposure plays a role even when navigation remains straightforward. Heat builds under canopy, cold settles after sunset. Moisture from rain or stream crossings dampens clothing. None of these factors alone prevent progress. Together, they lengthen the time required to cover familiar ground. The trail remains visible, but the effort to follow it increases. Decision-making shifts as the day extends. Visitors may calculate remaining distance based on memory rather than current pace. A destination believed to be close feels attainable despite mounting fatigue. Rangers note that many delayed hikers remain oriented and aware of their location. The issue is not confusion, but diminished capacity to maintain speed safely. Stops occur at predictable points. Benches near overlooks, flat areas beside creeks, and widened sections of trail appear frequently in reports. These locations invite rest and become temporary endpoints when energy drops. Rangers encountering delayed parties often find them seated rather than moving. aware of where they are but unsure how long it will take to finish. Medical issues on intact trails are common and varied. Muscle cramps, joint pain, and dehydration appear more frequently than traumatic injuries. These conditions develop gradually. Visitors may downplay early symptoms until movement becomes difficult. Rangers responding to such calls focus on stabilization rather than extraction when possible, assisting with hydration and pacing. Darkness changes the equation without altering the route. A clear trail in daylight becomes more demanding after sunset. Footing remains uneven, but visibility drops. Headlamps illuminate only a small section ahead. Progress slows further. Rangers document that many assistance calls occur after hikers realize they cannot maintain a safe pace in low light. Weather influences intact trails as much as remote terrain. Rain slicks exposed roots and rocks. Fog obscures junctions that are otherwise obvious. Ice forms in shaded sections, even when temperatures rise elsewhere. Rangers account for these factors when advising delayed hikers, sometimes recommending waiting for daylight rather than continuing. Communication remains possible in some of these cases. A call or message may reach dispatch, allowing rangers to confirm that the party is on trail and oriented. This information changes response strategy. Rather than broad searches, teams plan direct approaches. Assistance becomes a matter of timing rather than location. In other cases, communication fails despite proximity to maintained routes. Signal gaps occur along intact trails just as they do elsewhere. Rangers then rely on expected movement patterns. Knowing that the subject remained on trail narrows possibilities. Entry points, intended destinations, and average travel times guide response. Incident reports show that recovery locations on intact trails are often close to trailheads. Proximity does not guarantee ease of return. Elevation change near trail ends can be steep. Fatigue peaks late in the day. Rangers emphasize that the last mile can be as demanding as the first, particularly after hours of sustained effort. Assistance on trail follows established procedures. Rangers assess condition, provide light or clothing if needed, and set a controlled pace for exit. The goal is steady movement rather than speed. These escorts may take hours, even over short distances, reflecting the cumulative effects of the day. These outcomes rarely involve urgency. Rangers describe them as routine assists. The language used in documentation is neutral, listing time, location, and action taken. The presence of a trail does not elevate or reduce the seriousness of the situation. It provides structure, not immunity. Visitors sometimes express surprise at needing help on a marked route. Rangers address this by explaining how time, terrain, and fatigue interact. The explanation is practical rather than corrective. It reflects an understanding that maintained trails still demand respect for conditions. Historical records show that intact trails have always produced incident. Early park reports from decades past describe similar patterns. Delayed returns, overnight stays, and assisted walkouts along known routes. Modern equipment has changed communication but not the underlying dynamic. The distinction between being lost and being delayed matters operationally. Rangers treat delayed hikers on trail as predictable and manageable. Resources are allocated accordingly. The emphasis remains on safe resolution rather than urgency. In the Smokies, the trail's presence does not define the experience. It frames it. The path may remain visible from start to finish, but the day reshapes how it is traveled. Rangers recognize this and plan responses with that reality in mind. When the trail is still there, the challenge lies not in finding the way, but in completing it under changing conditions. Assistance becomes a matter of endurance rather than direction. The route remains unchanged. The traveler does not. The return that takes longer. The outward portion of a hike often sets expectations that do not hold. Early movement feels efficient. Muscles are rested. Attention is fresh. The trail presents itself as manageable, and progress appears steady. Rangers note that many visitors base their entire day's plan on this initial pace, assuming it can be sustained without accounting for cumulative strain. As the return begins, conditions are rarely identical to those encountered earlier. Light shifts direction. Shadows fall across sections that were fully visible before. The same rocks and routes now appear less distinct. What required moderate attention on the way out demands more careful placement on the way back. These changes slow movement in subtle increments. Physical fatigue alters mechanics, stride shortens, balance requires conscious effort. Joints absorb repeated stress, accumulated over hours rather than minutes. Rangers reviewing medical assist reports frequently see knee pain and ankle instability emerge late in the day. These issues are not usually sudden injuries. They develop through repetition and load rather than impact. Elevation change becomes more noticeable during return travel. Descents that felt brief earlier exert a cumulative toll. Muscles responsible for control rather than propulsion fatigue faster. Visitors often underestimate this effect, assuming downhill travel will compensate for tiredness. Rangers document that downhill sections frequently account for delayed returns rather than expedited ones. Environmental exposure compounds fatigue. Clothing dampened earlier may remain wet, drawing heat away from the body. In warmer months, salt loss through sweat contributes to cramping. In cooler seasons, reduced movement during breaks accelerates chilling. Rangers assess these factors when determining whether a group can continue unaided or requires assistance. Hydration and nutrition decisions made earlier affect the return disproportionately. Water carried may be partially consumed, rationed unintentionally, or exhausted altogether. Snacks saved for later may not provide adequate energy. Rangers note that many delayed hikers still possess food and water, but hesitate to stop long enough to use them effectively, prioritizing forward movement instead. Psychological factors influence pace. Familiarity with the trail can create pressure to finish rather than reassess. The knowledge that a parking area or road lies ahead encourages continued effort even when conditions suggest slowing. Rangers observe that visitors often push hardest near the end, increasing risk during the most fatigued stage. Time perception shifts during return. Minutes feel longer as effort increases. Remaining distance may be estimated optimistically, based on earlier progress rather than current speed. Rangers analyzing timelines often find that return estimates diverge sharply from actual completion times, even when routes are well known. Stops during return travel occur more frequently but last longer. Benches, logs, and flat sections invite rest. These pauses provide recovery but also extend exposure to environmental conditions. Rangers encountering delayed parties often find them resting repeatedly rather than moving continuously, aware of fatigue but uncertain how to adjust plans. Footwear performance changes over time. Boots and shoes that felt supportive early may compress, reducing cushioning. Wet conditions alter grip. Laces loosen. Small discomforts accumulate, affecting gait. Rangers note that foot-related complaints increase during return travel, contributing to slower movement without visible injury. Light availability becomes critical late in the day. Dense canopy reduces illumination well before sunset. On return routes, shaded sections may appear darker than expected due to changing angles. Visitors often underestimate how quickly usable light diminishes. Headlamps carried for emergencies may be underpowered or untested, further limiting pace. Weather interacts with timing in predictable ways. Afternoon storms introduce slick surfaces during return travel. Fog may develop at higher elevations just as visitors descend. Rangers account for these conditions when estimating delays, recognizing that return segments are more vulnerable to weather changes than outbound ones. Decision points during return are fewer but more consequential. Junctions passed earlier may appear different when approached from the opposite direction. Signage orientation favors one approach over another. Rangers note occasional wrong turns during return travel, even among visitors who navigated outbound successfully. These errors are typically corrected quickly but add distance and time. Medical assists related to return fatigue follow consistent patterns. Rangers respond to reports of leg cramps, dizziness, and exhaustion more often than traumatic injuries. Treatment focuses on rest, hydration, and gradual movement. Extraction is considered only when movement cannot be resumed safely. Communication during return delays varies. Some parties remain in contact with dispatch, updating progress intermittently. Others lose signal as elevation changes. Rangers interpret loss of contact during return differently than initial absence. Expected movement corridors guide response, reducing uncertainty. Search and assist records show that many return-related delays resolve without intervention. Visitors reach trailheads later than planned, tired but unharmed. These cases are often unreported. The visible incidents represent only a portion of extended returns occurring daily across the park. Rangers incorporate this understanding into visitor guidance. Advice emphasizes turnaround times rather than destinations. Visitors are encouraged to plan return segments with the same attention as outbound travel. This guidance reflects observed outcomes rather than abstract caution. Historical accounts from the park show that extended returns have always occurred. Early ranger logs describe parties arriving after dark, moving slowly along known routes. Modern equipment has altered communication, but not the underlying dynamics of fatigue and terrain. The return segment reframes the entire hike. What began as manageable becomes demanding through accumulation rather than escalation. The trail does not change. The traveler does. Rangers treat this phase as predictable, planning assistance around expected slowdowns rather than unexpected failure. Understanding return dynamics shapes response priorities. Rangers allocate resources based on likely delays rather than distance alone. This approach reduces urgency while maintaining readiness. It reflects long familiarity with how people move when energy declines. In the Smokies, the return often defines the day. It reveals limits set not by navigation, but by endurance. Trails remain visible, routes remain known, yet progress contracts. Rangers recognize this pattern and respond with patience rather than surprise. The return that takes longer is not an anomaly. It is a common outcome shaped by terrain, time, and human limits. Preparation acknowledges it. Response accommodates it. The path back remains the same. The pace rarely does. Morning finds what night hid. Morning in the Smokies does not arrive all at once. Light spreads unevenly across ridges and valleys, touching high ground first and leaving lower areas dim for hours. Fog often lingers along creeks and in narrow hollows, thinning gradually as air warms and moves. Trails that were difficult to read the night before become visible again in stages, not instantly. Rangers working early shifts are accustomed to this slow reveal, knowing that daylight changes conditions without erasing what came before. Many incidents that extend overnight are resolved after first light. These are not new situations, but continuations shaped by visibility rather than movement. Rangers reviewing logs note that delayed hikers frequently remain stationary through the night, waiting for daylight before resuming travel. This decision aligns with guidance given during evening contact when available, and reflects a general understanding that progress improves with light. Morning alters perception, depth returns, colors separate. The distinction between trail and surrounding ground becomes clearer. Roots and rocks that blended into shadow regain definition. Rangers emphasize that these visual changes alone can restore confidence and pace, even before rest and warmth are considered. Navigation becomes less effortful without any change in route. Temperature shifts accompany sunrise. Cold air settles overnight, especially in valleys, then lifts as sunlight reaches lower elevations. Clothing damp from the previous day begins to dry. Hands regain dexterity. These changes reduce the physical strain of movement. Rangers often note improved condition reports from stationary parties shortly after sunrise, even when no other assistance has arrived. Sound also changes with daylight. Bird activity increases. Wind patterns shift. Streams remain audible but no longer dominate the soundscape. Rangers moving through search areas rely on these changes, pausing to listen during early hours when background noise is low but distinct. Search operations that continue into morning hours follow adjusted priorities. Teams reassess areas covered overnight and expand into new sectors made accessible by light. Helicopter support, when available, becomes more effective as visibility improves. Aerial crews can scan open slopes, ridgelines, and clearings that were indistinguishable in low light. This expanded view often confirms assumptions made during night planning. Ground teams move more efficiently after sunrise. Footing improves as surfaces dry. Hazards are easier to spot. Progress accelerates without requiring increased effort. Rangers document that areas taking hours to cover at night may be traversed quickly in daylight, allowing resources to shift toward verification rather than exploration. Subjects located in the morning are frequently close to expected routes. Many are found on or near trails, sometimes within short distances of where they stopped overnight. These outcomes reinforce patterns seen across years of incident data. Darkness obscures proximity. Daylight reveals it without altering position. Medical assessments conducted in the morning often differ from those made at night. Fatigue remains, but cold-related stress diminishes. Hydration and nutrition can be addressed more effectively. Rangers note that individuals who appeared marginal overnight may walk out under their own power after rest and daylight improve conditions. This change does not indicate recovery from injury, but relief from environmental strain. Morning light also clarifies evidence. Footprints, disturbed vegetation, and misplaced gear become visible. Rangers use these indicators to confirm movement patterns or stationary behavior. Overnight conditions may preserve or obscure such signs depending on weather. Dew highlights impressions. Rain erases them. Rangers interpret these details cautiously, aware of their limitations. Decision-making improves with light. Choices made at night are constrained by uncertainty. In daylight, options expand. Routes can be evaluated visually. Distances can be estimated more accurately. Rangers observe that hikers who resume movement after sunrise tend to make more conservative decisions, stopping to rest or adjust plans rather than pushing forward blindly. Communication often resumes in the morning. Devices that failed overnight may reconnect as atmospheric conditions change or as subjects move slightly to higher ground. Delayed text messages and voicemail notifications sometimes arrive out of sequence. Rangers log these contacts carefully, correlating timestamps with known movement. Morning contact frequently confirms that assistance is no longer urgent. Some searches conclude quickly after daylight without direct ranger contact. Visitors walk out independently and report their return hours later. These cases are recorded differently from rescues, but they contribute to the overall understanding of overnight delay patterns. Rangers consider them successful outcomes shaped by patience rather than intervention. Weather remains a variable factor. Morning storms occasionally reverse expected improvements. Fog may thicken instead of lifting. Rain may return. Rangers monitor forecasts closely during overnight incidents, adjusting expectations accordingly. The assumption that daylight improves conditions is generally valid, but not guaranteed. Morning operations are methodical rather than hurried. Rangers avoid rushing simply because visibility improves. Fatigue affects both subjects and responders. Shifts change. Information is handed off between teams. Continuity is maintained through logs and briefings rather than memory. Public perception often differs from operational reality. Morning recoveries may appear sudden or fortunate from the outside. Rangers view them as the result of predictable processes. Darkness delays resolution. Light restores options. The outcome reflects environment rather than chance. Historical records from the park show that overnight delays have long been part of Smoky Mountain travel. Early ranger journals describe similar patterns, with parties waiting until dawn to descend or continue. Modern equipment has altered communication, but not the fundamental relationship between light and movement. Morning also changes how incidents are documented. Reports shift from uncertainty to confirmation. Locations are fixed, timelines close. Rangers complete records with times, coordinates, and actions taken. Language remains factual, avoiding interpretation beyond observed condition. The return of light does not erase fatigue or shorten distance. It reduces uncertainty. Trails become readable again. Landmarks reappear. Movement aligns more closely with expectation. Rangers rely on this transition when planning overnight responses, knowing that patience often yields resolution. In the Smokies, night constrains and morning releases. What was hidden by shadow becomes ordinary again. The trail did not move. The terrain did not change. The difference lies in what can be seen and judged. Morning finds what night hid by restoring clarity rather than altering outcome. For rangers, this is not a dramatic turn. It is a routine phase in the life of the park, repeated across seasons and years, shaping how delayed journeys come to an end. The pattern rangers do not announce. Rangers in Great Smoky Mountains National Park record incidents in standardized language. Dates, locations, weather conditions, response actions, and outcomes are logged without commentary. Over time, these records accumulate into volumes that describe daily operations rather than exceptional events. Within them, patterns appear. They are not highlighted in public briefings or visitor materials. They exist quietly in repetition. One recurring pattern involves timing. Many incidents begin within a narrow window of the day. Late morning departures, followed by extended afternoons, appear frequently in reports. Visitors start later than intended, often after travel delays or informal planning changes. The margin for return narrows before movement begins. Rangers note that this timing correlates strongly with delayed exits rather than navigational errors. Another pattern centers on group size. Solo hikers and pairs appear more often in incident logs than larger groups. The difference is not attributed to experience alone. Larger groups move more slowly but make decisions collectively, pausing to reassess plans. Smaller parties adjust informally, often continuing despite fatigue. Rangers treat these distinctions operationally rather than judgmentally. Seasonal shifts produce predictable changes. Spring incidents often involve wet trails, swollen creeks, and cool temperatures at elevation. Summer reports emphasize heat, humidity, and dehydration. Autumn brings shorter daylight and increased traffic. Winter logs focus on ice, snow, and rapid weather changes. The pattern is not in the presence of incidents, but in their form. Conditions repeat, responses adapt, trail choice appears consistently in records. Certain routes generate more assistance calls than others, despite similar mileage. These trails often combine elevation gain, limited turnaround points, and popular destinations. Rangers recognize these routes by name and plan patrols accordingly. The pattern is geographic rather than coincidental. Experience level does not separate clearly. First-time visitors and frequent hikers appear side by side in reports. Familiarity reduces some risks while introducing others. Repeat visitors may rely on memory rather than current conditions. Rangers document cases where previous success shaped decisions that did not align with the day's reality. Equipment patterns emerge as well. Delayed hikers often carry phones with mapping applications but lack dedicated navigation tools. Headlamps, when present, are sometimes untested or low-powered. Extra clothing layers appear inconsistently. Rangers do not treat these omissions as negligence. They note them as common variables, influencing duration rather than cause. Communication gaps recur in specific terrain types. Narrow valleys, north-facing slopes, and dense evergreen cover appear repeatedly in notes about failed contact attempts. Rangers internalize this geography through experience rather than signage. The pattern informs where repeaters are placed and where response expectations are adjusted. Another consistent feature involves proximity. Many incidents occur closer to infrastructure than visitors expect. Distances measured on maps do not translate directly to travel time or ease. Rangers encounter delayed parties within a few miles of trailheads more often than deep in backcountry zones. This proximity does not reduce response complexity. Decision points are rarely dramatic. Reports describe gradual extensions rather than sudden crises, a lunch break that lasted longer than planned, a viewpoint that invited continuation, a return delayed by slower pace. Rangers see these sequences repeated with minor variation across years. The pattern lies in accumulation rather than error. Waiting behavior follows its own rhythm. Parties who stop early tend to remain stable. Those who push on despite mounting fatigue generate more complex responses. Rangers note that early waiting often leads to morning resolution, while late movement increases risk. This observation shapes guidance but is not formalized as rule. Search durations reflect these patterns. Many operations conclude within predictable timeframes once key variables are identified. Entry point, intended route, and weather narrow possibilities quickly. Rangers allocate resources based on probability, informed by past outcomes rather than urgency driven by uncertainty alone. Public messaging rarely reflects these internal observations directly. Visitor materials emphasize preparation and general safety. Specific patterns are not highlighted to avoid oversimplification. Rangers rely on discretion and situational judgment rather than broad warnings. The patterns guide action more than instruction. Training incorporates these observations informally. New rangers learn through shadowing and review rather than lists. Incident debriefs focus on what worked operationally. Patterns are discussed as context, not conclusions. This approach preserves flexibility. Documentation language remains restrained. Reports avoid speculation or interpretation. Patterns emerge only when records are viewed collectively. Rangers familiar with years of logs recognize them instinctively. The knowledge is practical, not theoretical. The park's size amplifies repetition. With millions of visitors annually, small probabilities become regular occurrences. What appears rare to an individual becomes routine at scale. Rangers plan accordingly, expecting certain outcomes within certain conditions. These unannounced patterns do not suggest inevitability. They describe tendencies shaped by terrain, weather, and human behavior. Rangers adjust response based on them, not to predict incidents, but to resolve them efficiently. Visitors rarely see this layer of understanding. They encounter rangers during brief interactions or assistance calls. The broader pattern remains unseen, embedded in records and experience rather than signage or announcements. The Smokies continue to generate the same conditions year after year. Trails age, weather cycles repeat, human expectations remain similar. Rangers adapt within this stability, guided by patterns that do not require publicity to be effective. The pattern rangers do not announce is not secret. It is simply cumulative. It exists because the park operates continuously, observing outcomes without the need to interpret them publicly. Response improves through familiarity rather than warning. Within this framework, each incident becomes both individual and representative. Rangers proceed without commentary, guided by what has already occurred many times before. What remains after the log is closed. When an incident ends in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the final action is administrative. A report is completed, times are confirmed, locations are fixed to coordinates or named features. The log is closed. What follows is not silence, but routine. Rangers return to patrol schedules, maintenance tasks, and visitor contacts. The park resumes its ordinary pace without marking the transition. Most outcomes do not appear dramatic when recorded. A delayed hiker escorted to a trailhead, a group assisted after dark, a search concluded at first light. These entries sit beside one another in records, separated only by dates and reference numbers. The language remains consistent, regardless of outcome. Resolution is documented, not emphasized. What remains after a log is closed is often invisible to those outside the process. Visitors who required assistance may return home without further contact. Others resolve delays independently and never appear in records at all. Rangers acknowledge that many extended hikes, overnight waits, and slow returns go unreported. The absence of documentation does not indicate absence of experience. Self-resolved situations form a large portion of backcountry activity. Visitors misjudge time, adjust plans, and adapt without external assistance. They wait for daylight, turn back earlier than planned, or accept longer days than expected. These decisions occur quietly and leave no trace beyond personal memory. Rangers are aware that the official record captures only a fraction of what unfolds daily. The park's scale ensures that this gap persists. With millions of annual visitors and hundreds of miles of trail, not every delay becomes an incident. Rangers rely on patterns derived from reported cases while recognizing that those patterns are incomplete. The record reflects response, not the full spectrum of experience. Training accounts for this limitation. Rangers are taught to interpret logs as operational tools rather than comprehensive histories. Each entry informs response planning without defining risk universally. The absence of a report does not mean conditions were benign. It means no assistance was requested or required. Environmental factors continue unchanged after documentation ends. Weather cycles persist, trails erode and recover, vegetation grows and thins. The same conditions that shaped one incident will shape another. Rangers do not treat resolution as closure in a broader sense. It marks the end of involvement, not the end of influence. Visitors rarely see this continuity. An assisted hike may feel singular and memorable. For rangers, it joins a long sequence of similar events. Familiarity does not reduce attention, it informs efficiency. Response becomes measured rather than urgent, guided by what is typical rather than what is rare. Communication logs illustrate this continuity. Calls end, radios go quiet, devices reconnect or remain silent. Dispatch notes the final contact time. The absence of further communication becomes expected. Rangers understand that silence after resolution reflects return to normal activity rather than lingering risk. The physical landscape absorbs these moments without record. Trails show no sign of delayed footsteps. Campsites return to empty clearings. Creeks continue to flow. The park does not preserve evidence of routine difficulty. Only major events leave visible marks, and even those fade with time. Rangers maintain awareness of this impermanence. Documentation is thorough but restrained, acknowledging that the environment does not change to reflect human schedules. Reports exist for coordination, accountability, and learning, not memorialization. Once filed, they become part of a reference set rather than a narrative. Public understanding often focuses on isolated events, a search reported in news releases, a rescue described briefly. These accounts lack context by necessity. Rangers do not supplement them with interpretation. The broader pattern remains internal, guiding operations without shaping perception directly. This separation influences how safety guidance is framed. Visitor materials emphasize preparation without citing specific outcomes. Rangers avoid listing incidents as cautionary examples. The intent is to describe conditions rather than consequences. This approach reflects an understanding that experience varies widely and unpredictably. After logs close, follow-up is minimal. Rangers do not track long-term outcomes for assisted visitors. Medical recoveries, personal reflections, and future behavior remain outside the park's scope. The focus returns to readiness for the next call. The absence of visible aftermath can be misleading. Visitors may assume that assistance implies error or miscalculation. Rangers view it as alignment with operational reality. Delays, waits, and assists are treated as expected interactions between people and terrain. Historical records show that this dynamic has persisted since the park's early years. Old ranger journals describe late returns, overnight stops, and guided walkouts using language similar to modern reports. Technology has changed tools, but not the relationship between movement, time, and environment. The park's management structure reinforces this perspective. Incidents are analyzed for procedural improvement rather than narrative significance. Lessons focus on access routes, communication, timing, and resource allocation. Emotional framing is absent by design. Visitors who pass through the park after an incident encounter no sign of what occurred. Trails remain open, signs remain unchanged. The environment presents itself without annotation. This continuity supports the park's role as shared space rather than monitored corridor. What remains, operationally, is preparedness. Rangers carry forward adjustments informed by experience. Patrol schedules shift subtly. Briefings include recent conditions. Knowledge accumulates quietly. The log's closure marks a point of reference rather than an endpoint. From the visitor perspective, the end of an incident often coincides with departure. The park recedes into memory. For rangers, it remains present, structured by familiarity rather than recollection. Each closed log contributes to an understanding that is never finalized. The Smokies do not present themselves as hazardous or benign. They remain consistent. Trails continue to function as they always have, offering passage without guarantee. Distance resists simplification. Communication varies with terrain. After documentation ends, these realities persist unchanged. The park does not adjust to human expectation. Rangers adapt to the park. Visitors encounter it briefly. The interaction leaves little trace once complete. What remains after the log is closed is not a lesson or warning. It is a condition. The same landscape awaits the next arrival. The same constraints apply. The same patterns will likely repeat without announcement. In this continuity, resolution is not an ending. It is a return to baseline. The park resumes its ordinary state, shaped by terrain, weather, and movement rather than memory. Rangers remain ready, trails remain open, records wait for the next entry. If you found this documentary useful, consider subscribing for more calm, long-form stories like this. Leave a comment if you've spent time in the Smokies or noticed how quickly conditions can change. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.